I asked a man to marry me on a parking lot bench at 2:47 in the morning. And he said no. Not, let me think about it, not, this is so sudden, just no. A flat, honest, devastating no that hung in the cold air between us like smoke.
Hi friends, if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, please click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story as interesting as this one so you don't miss it.
My name is Sonia Nabokov. I am 27 years old, and this is the story of how the worst moment of my life became the beginning of everything I never knew I wanted. Let me back up. The parking lot bench was outside a 24-hour diner in the ugliest part of our city, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like regret and the fluorescent lights make everyone look half dead. I was sitting there with my legs pulled up to my chest, my long black hair falling in my face, still wearing the dress I had put on 6 hours earlier for a date that never happened. My phone had 17 unanswered texts. My mascara was probably smeared, and I was about to do the stupidest thing I had ever done in my life. Richard Okonkwo walked out of that diner holding 2 styrofoam cups of terrible coffee. He was 30 years old, 6'3", with the kind of presence that made every room feel smaller. He worked as a software engineer at some startup I could never remember the name of. We'd been friends for 3 years, ever since we met at a mutual friend's birthday party, where I spilled red wine on his white shirt, and he laughed instead of getting angry. He was the kind of man who listened when you talked, who showed up when he said he would, who made you feel like the world was not as heavy as it seemed. He was also the man I had been in love with for 2 years and never told. He sat down next to me on that bench, handed me one of the coffees, and asked what happened. I told him the truth. My boyfriend of 8 months, Daniel, had just broken up with me, over text, while I was waiting for him at the restaurant he chose. He said he had met someone else, that he was sorry, that he hoped I understood. I did not cry when I read it. I just sat there at that table for 20 minutes, staring at my phone, feeling nothing and everything at once. Then I left, walked 4 blocks in heels that were killing my feet, and ended up at this diner because it was the only place still open. I called Richard because he was the only person I wanted to talk to. He did not say, "I told you so," even though he never liked Daniel. He did not try to fill the silence with empty comfort. He just sat there next to me, solid and real, and let me exist in my mess. We sat in silence for maybe 5 minutes. The parking lot was empty except for one car with a broken taillight. The air smelled like grease and gasoline. The bench was cold enough that I could feel it through my dress. And somewhere in that silence, something in my brain snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was the humiliation, maybe it was the way Richard always showed up when I needed him, no questions asked, no judgment given. Maybe it was the clarity that comes when you hit rock bottom and realize you have been looking at the wrong person this entire time. I turned to him and said, "Richard, marry me." He froze mid-sip. Coffee almost spilled down his shirt. He lowered the cup slowly and looked at me like I had just spoken a language he did not understand. He asked what I just said. I repeated it, clearer this time, my voice steadier than I expected. "Marry me. I'm serious." The look on his face was not shock or surprise. It was something worse. It was pity. He set his coffee down on the bench between us. He said my name softly, the way you talk to someone who was about to break. Then he told me no. He said I was hurting, that I was not thinking straight, that I did not mean it. He said I deserved better than a pity proposal in a parking lot at 3 in the morning. He said he cared about me too much to let me make a decision like this when I was vulnerable. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "Sonia, you do not want to marry me. You want someone to make the pain stop, and I cannot be that for you." I felt my face burn. Shame, anger, embarrassment, I couldn't tell which. I stood up, told him to forget I said anything, and started walking toward the street. He called after me, but I did not turn around. I heard his footsteps behind me. He caught up and grabbed my wrist gently, stopping me. He asked where I was going. I told him I was going home. He said my apartment was 4 miles away and my feet were already bleeding from those heels. I looked down. He was right. I hadn't even noticed. He told me to get in his car. I told him I was fine. He said he knew I was fine, but he was driving me home anyway because that's what friends do. We did not talk during the drive. The city lights blurred past the window. My reflection stared back at me, hollow and ridiculous. When we pulled up outside my building, I got out without saying thank you. I walked to my door, unlocked it, and went inside without looking back. I did not cry that night. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the entire humiliating scene over and over. I had just asked a man to marry me in a parking lot after getting dumped via text, and he said no. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls from Richard and a text that just said, "We need to talk." I ignored them. I called in sick to work, even though I wasn't sick. I stayed in bed scrolling through nothing on my phone, eating leftover Chinese food from 3 days ago, and pretending the night before never happened. By the 3rd day, Richard showed up at my apartment. He knocked until I opened the door. When I finally did, he was standing there with grocery bags, a determined look on his face, and no apology in his eyes. He walked past me into my kitchen and started unpacking food. I asked what he was doing. He said he was making me dinner because I had been ignoring him, and he was not leaving until we talked. I told him there was nothing to talk about. He said there was everything to talk about. We stood in my kitchen, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, he turned to me and asked if I meant it. I asked what he was talking about. He said the proposal. He wanted to know if I was serious or if it was just the breakup talking. I felt my walls go up immediately. I told him it was a mistake, that I was upset and not thinking clearly, exactly what he said. He stepped closer and said he didn't believe me. He said he had known me for 3 years and he knew when I was lying. Then he asked me a question that made my heart stop. "How long have you had feelings for me?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. The silence stretched between us. He took another step closer. He said he needed to know the truth, because the only reason he said no that night was because he thought I was using him as a rebound. But if I actually meant it, if I actually wanted him, then everything changed. My hands were shaking. I told him the truth. 2 years. I had feelings for him for 2 years and never said anything because I was terrified of ruining our friendship, because he was the best thing in my life and I couldn't risk losing him, because every time I dated someone else, I was trying to stop wanting him and it never worked. His expression shifted. Something raw and unguarded crossed his face. He said he had been waiting 2 years for me to see him as more than a friend, that every time I introduced him to a new boyfriend, it killed him a little inside, that he said no in that parking lot because he would rather have me as a friend than lose me completely by being the rebound guy who took advantage of my pain. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. I asked him why he never said anything. He said because I never gave him a reason to think I felt the same way, because I kept dating other men and he didn't want to be selfish, because he loved me too much to ruin what we had on a maybe. We stood there in my kitchen staring at each other, 2 people who had been circling the same truth for 2 years without ever saying it out loud. Then I did the second stupidest thing I had ever done in my life. I closed the space between us and kissed him. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was 2 years of wanting, 2 years of pretending, 2 years of almost finally breaking open. He kissed me back like he had been starving for it. His hands found my waist, pulled me closer. My fingers tangled in his shirt. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine and said, "If you ask me again, the answer is yes." I laughed, breathless and dizzy. I asked what he meant. He said, "If you asked me to marry me again, right now, for real, not because I was hurt, but because I wanted him, he would say yes." I pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. I asked if he was serious. He said he was never more serious about anything in his life. So I asked him again, right there in my tiny kitchen with grocery bags still on the counter, and my hair still mess, and my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Richard Okonkwo, will you marry me?" He smiled, wide and genuine, and said, "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt, just yes. The first few months after that parking lot bench felt like falling and flying at the same time.